Hello, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to today's episode. Today I have Eva Saunders. She is the artistic, crafty brain behind Gingerly Quilt Co. She has multiple patterns that she has designed, and now she is launching her quilt painting class. It is such a cool technique, and the class takes you through every step of the process of learning how to use just little thin strips of fabric and straight line stitching to create works of art. In the class, she walks you through how to recreate the Starry Night painting by Van Gogh, and you can go to her Instagram and see the examples that she's made, and it's just such a cool perspective on bringing art and quilting all together and using a new technique to express the artful nature of quilting and of fabric and textiles. So I'm so excited to chat about that with her today on this episode. So I hope you guys give it a listen. Also, there is a discount code. So if you use code GRANNIES when you sign up for the class, you will get $20 off of your tuition. So it's a 10-week long class. She said it's about 5 hours per week of work. And in 10 weeks, you end up with a masterpiece of your own. So go sign up today at gingerlyquiltco.com. Use code GRANNIES at checkout and get $20 off your class tuition and make some beautiful art. And in the meantime, let's hear from Eva. Hi, Eva. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. So we heard from you in the Quarter Inch Collective, like one of our monthly calls, and we were talking about quilt con submission. So it's like a little bit different topic than what we're here to talk about today. But just from hearing from you there and following you, I knew I wanted to have you on the show. So I'm just so glad we get to like have you within 2024 and not push it out any farther. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about all things art and quilts and QuiltCon if you want to talk about that.
It comes
Yeah.
up a lot. It's not surprising, but kind of surprising how much I talk about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to stop. But also, it's where I got introduced to so many fun creators and quilters, and it just expanded my world more. So I'm like, I have to give credit. But anyway, here we are again talking about it. But first, first, I just want to know how you even got into quilting in the first place.
Yes, funny story. My grandma was a seamstress. So she did alterations, curtains, she's self-taught. She was in Germany and she, after the war, because she was a kid during World War II and
Mm,
didn't have a lot of education at that time, it was very disruptive. And she got a sewing machine for her wedding and thought, man, what can I do for work? And signed up to be a seamstress somewhere because she had that sewing machine, and then taught herself, everything she needs to know to keep going, and opened her own shop, which was not super common for women then.
mhm.
Um, and when I was a kid and spent time with my grandma over the summer, like my parents were traveling, they dropped me off and I hung out with her in her sewing room, watched her do alterations, watched her do like these huge curtains. If you're like super little, they seem like they never end.
Yeah.
Um, and I just was a very curious kid. I wanted to know how everything works. So she like, gave me a button tin and was like, just, try sew on some buttons. And
Mhm.
um from buttons it went to little squares, and she got into patchwork in at the end of the 90s. I was maybe 10 or so, and we just did patchwork together, and I wouldn't let her do anything else. I was like, no, back to the sewing room, I want to sew. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those hobbies that really stuck with me, unlike any other hobby. And she also taught me how to alter clothes. So all through college, I altered all my clothes myself. I'm like short and petite, so it's really hard for me to find clothes that fit. So
Yeah.
that really helped out. And yeah, I got my own sewing machine for college. Um, did sewing off and on, not as much quilting because it wasn't as cool, when you're in college. But
Yeah.
then with the mask frenzy during COVID, I was making masks again. I got tons of donations from my neighborhood of old bed sheets that I repurposed for masks. And I had so much left over. Like, it was literally a whole tower as tall as me. And we had to move. So I was like, oh, I'll pick up, the nicest ones and make a quilt. That was the first time I'd made my own quilt without my grandma. And I just got hooked. And then I found all these modern patterns out,
Hmm.
that are out there now. And I'd studied design in the meantime. So it kind of all, logically went to, oh, now I'm going to make my own patterns because
Yeah.
I'm a graphic designer now and I can do that. So it was really organic. And it just, whenever I sew, it reminds me of the time with my grandma that I have really fond memories of, especially in the pandemic when everything was unsteady and we didn't know what was going to happen. And it was really nice to go back to that time.
Hmm.
And I still do every time I sew. It just brings me back. It's really nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's sweet. I love that she was so willing to teach you and give you that time, because I think it can be hard, especially if, you're a sewist that has your own projects that you want to get to and you've got this little kid like, show me how. Like, I think that's sweet that she took the time to share that with you. And it's a life skill. I think it's so important. And um it's funny because we were just like kind of back and forth about this very sweatshirt I'm wearing, about the size of it. Cause I was saying like, oh, this is my true to size, but it's also like really oversized. And you're like, well, the small's not going to work because if it's oversized and you're true to size, like, it's a whole thing where like the fashion industry just like is so discouraging sometimes. But if you have the skill of sewing and just kind of knowing some basics about alterations, like you can make your clothes fit and you can make your own clothes. And it's a self-sufficiency that I think gets missed on a lot of people. And so it's really, I think it's such a highly valuable skill to have. And that's really great that she shared that with you and gifted that to you, because really it's like a life gift, right?
Yeah, altering pants is like my greatest superpower in my family. My parents always were like, Eva, can you hang those pants for me? Because she didn't teach it to her daughter because her daughter was doing her own thing, my mom.
Mhm.
And I got, it skipped a generation and I got to learn it. So everybody always comes to me when they need something hemmed or
Yeah.
altered. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good skill to have, definitely. I do have a lot of sweaters, quilty sweaters. They're like too big on me, and I haven't quite figured out how to properly alter those so they fit because they're harder than, just hemming some pants.
Yeah.
But I'm still learning. I've done my first like big piece of clothing from scratch was my quilt coat that I made earlier this year that I wore at QuiltCon.
Hmm.
Um, or I might have for QuiltCon to wear. And that taught me a lot about what kind of alterations I have to do. I like bought a book onto how to properly do alterations and in which places. And
Hmm.
um, so I learned a lot about how my body doesn't fit into the mold and what. And that now I notice it with clothes. I put them on and I'm like, yeah, it fits totally like that standard pattern that I had to alter. I don't
Yeah.
alter all my clothes. Sometimes I just go, oh well, then it just fits that way. But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was nice when I made my first own piece of clothing to like experience a good fit because I hadn't known that if you put a jacket on, your arms aren't supposed to be like non-movable, because
Right.
they're like ill fitted. It was like, ooh, I can move my arms around in a jacket. That's new, it's
Yeah.
um if you're short, or I don't know what it is for me, but I think it's my shoulders are like slimmer than most people's, and so like the
Mm.
sleeves just don't fit right and I can't move very much. And I'm too lazy to change every single coat I have. But this coat fits really good. And it's
Yeah.
really nice.
That's good. Yeah. It's interesting. Like my mom sews and she's always sewn. And so when growing up, like she could make me clothes that fit, or she could help me make clothes fit better. And yeah, when your body doesn't necessarily fit like off the rack clothes, which most people's don't. So it's crazy that we allow a piece of cloth to make us feel bad about our bodies when it's like it doesn't fit the majority of people. Anyway, that's a different soapbox. But it's just nice to have things that like actually fit, that are like made or altered to look good on you because it fits your shape and your body. And And it can go into quilting too. It's like you can take those kind of concepts of like, what do I want this to be and how do I want to use my skills to like make something beautiful? And it's interesting the different little kind of techniques and how much they share back and forth, like in the different types of sewing you can do. So
Yeah, that's true. You know, one time a friend of mine brought over a friend. I used to live in LA in like a big house with lots of roommates. She brought over a friend, and that friend was a fit model for Target. And Target clothes like never fit me right. So I looked at her and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. If I look like her, I would fit in those clothes. It
right.
was so funny to see it like as a real person. I was like, there is a real person that fits and it makes sense. And I do not look like that. It was so funny, like such a light bulb moment of like,
Yeah.
it's just the average of everybody, and there happen to be a few select people who are the
Right.
average of everybody, but most people are not.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, yeah, I guess I didn't really even think that they would use a human, that it would just be like, oh, this came off of you know, a dress mold or a dress form or, whatever, just like, oh, we just made this pattern based on certain measurements. But yeah, to think that they actually put it on a person's body and then they're just like, yep, it's good enough for everybody. It's like, is it though? Well, that's wild and so cool. So did you go to school in LA or were you just living there for fun?
Yeah, well, no. So I went to film school in LA. That's why I moved from Germany to the US. I got a scholarship and I moved to LA to study film there because it's the best place to be if you study film.
Yeah.
After I'd studied photography and design. So yeah, and I've been looking for incorporating what I learned about filmmaking into the quilting. And so that kind of has come full circle for me now. So that I post on social media, I found little, tips and hacks, and now offer an online class too, which I film a lot in. And the filming aspect is really fun for me, just as much as the quilting part is fun for me. So
Yeah.
it's just a really cool combination.
Yeah. So it sounds like you just really taken a dive in the deep end of the creative kind of perspective of life. And that's a lot of creative things to get into that, most people don't have that background. And that's really cool. And I'm sure, obviously, like you're saying, it informs your quilting and your design and how you present your work and your ideas on your platforms. So that's really cool. And you've written some patterns, which is great. You've got like the paws, which is so cute. I really want to make that one because I have a kitty. I have a kitty cat, and I think that'd be so funny to, not funny, but just like fun to make and just have a quilt for her because I would make it for her.
Oh, yeah. I finished the sample actually this year of the bigger quilt because sometimes you get lazy. I had like a quilt top done. I took photos with it. I didn't get it quilted before release, and because I just couldn't decide on a panto,
Mm,
or on like how to quilt it. That sometimes stumps me because the design is perfect, and then you're like,
yeah,
but what do I put on top of it?
right.
Um, so I only just finished that this year because it was like a work in progress for me because I had photos and I was like, well, pattern has a photo.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't need to finish it right now. Off to do things, and then it was sitting in my closet. Um, and then I think we had some kind of collaboration, like a pattern bundle this year that I was invited to. So I was like, and they said photo of finished quilt as like a prerequisite, and I was like, okay, I guess now I gotta finish it. And I ended up, I'd never tried this before, but I put like a flannel on the back with little kitties on it. And then
Hmm.
I free motioned from the back to the front around like every fifth kitty, and made it
Oh,
my own panto. And it turned out really cute. So
yeah. Oh, that's
that's
such a good idea.
yeah. And it was really quick too, because I didn't need any stencils or anything. I didn't even baste it. I just like, you know, went rogue. When I hadn't done a quilt on my own before, and my grandma only hand quilted, so we've never done machine or long arm quilting together.
Hmm.
I tried to quilt it on my, before I had the banana, on my like little domestic machine. I had a little puff with like a tiny thread space. And I used high loft batting, and the quilt was um like a supersized queen. Like my husband was like, it needs to go over both sides of the bit. So it was huge and
Yeah.
high loft batting. And I was just, it was such a workout to like
My God.
stomp that through the machine. So I said, never again a queen quilt on my domestic machine, even the new one with no space.
Yeah.
And then now I'm like, if I do free motion, not bigger than a throw quilt, because it's unmanageable otherwise.
Yeah. 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 I've never quilted anything on a domestic machine because I just like learned long arm quilting out of the gate. So it I'm always just in awe of people who quilt on their domestic machines and like do just beautiful work. And I mean, it can be done in so many different ways. And it's lovely to see that people just like you you make it work however you know, however you want to get it done, it can get done. So that's really cool. And I, I sew and piece on a Bernina 7 series. So they're such nice machines. They can do
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. I got mine used last year in like a, from like a Facebook marketplace person. And I was really lucky that everything worked and, it worked out. And
Yeah.
then this year I got a backup one. Because whenever my machine's in the shop, sometimes it takes a week or two, and I'm like, well, I need to finish this project, and it's always when I need to finish a project. So
Hmm.
I got another used one as a backup. So now I
Nice.
always have a machine. And since I have a business now and I film a lot and I just need stuff to work, um, I was like, okay, I think I'm at a point now where I can have two machines, two nice
Yeah.
machines that
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
do the job and can do the quilting on my table and stuff. So
Yeah.
I really believe in good tools, but they don't have to be expensive. Like, you could quilt on a featherweight. I mean, they're, for an old machine, they're expensive, but not in the
Mhm.
grander scheme of things. Like they're what, like $500 now as collector's items, and they'll run forever. They're not like your $200 Walmart machine that will break after 2 years
Yeah.
and can't be repaired, and it's all made of plastic.
Hmm.
So I do have a vintage machine sewing collection too.
Oh, that's so cool.
Two treadle machines even that don't
Oh, wow.
require electricity, one table and two machines, because I like the designs on the machines.
Hmm.
So I like polish them up, make them run again, figure out what's not working. Um, yeah, so I've got a lot of, it's a lot of fun for me to try to figure out how sewing machines work. And it helps you so much with keeping even the more modern machines, running and oiled
Yeah.
and working. So if you understand sewing machines, it's so much smoother to work with any machine.
Yeah. Yeah. Because once you know how one thing works, you can kind of conceptualize it over even the different iterations and the newer machines. That's still the basics are still the same, right? You still have a bobbin, you still have, a
Yeah.
needle, you still have to thread the thread through all the tensioner discs and all that. So it's interesting. And I think it can be scary to try to like understand a machine, but I think the more you dive in and the more you kind of just give yourself the space to like, I'm just going to look at it. I'm just going to try to understand the movement of things. And it can be really valuable just in being able to troubleshoot little things. Cause I think if something just doesn't work right and then all of a sudden you're like, well, my machine's broken, it could just be that there's a piece of lint somewhere that it shouldn't be, or that it just needs a little bit of oil or a new needle, or just there's simple fixes a lot of times to these things that seem like catastrophic problems. So I think just spending time with your machine and getting to know its functions is really important. And again, to that like self-reliability, self-sustainability piece of like being able to sew your own things, like also being able to kind of troubleshoot and fix your machine on a minor level is also will keep you sewing. So that's cool that you have so many like vintage machines and that you've taken that piece of it too, like learning how to work and fix them. And that's awesome.
I remember when I was sewing without my grandma, and it had been a while since I'd sewn, I was fighting with my machine to no end just because I didn't remember that I had to hold the threads, and I got thread knots and everything all the time. And I was like, what is wrong? What is going on? And my thread spool was in the wrong spool holder, which is something most people don't know. If you have crossbone thread, it goes on the horizontal spool holder, not the vertical one. And if you
Mhm.
only have a vertical one, get an adapter. It just saves you so much pain if you know how to use your machine. And that's one of the reasons why for my upcoming class, it was really important for me to have a troubleshooting video. Once people sign up, they can access that so they can
Okay.
practice getting like comfortable with their sewing machine before they start the class.
Mhm.
Because you never know what level people come in when you
Right.
start. And there might be just this one little thing that you don't know yet, and that will make your sewing so much more smooth. Like you're using
Mhm.
the wrong needle, or you're using the wrong spool holder, or you may have a thread stuck in your machine, you haven't cleaned it. And the funny thing is, my first sewing machine, I didn't clean for 10 years because the manual didn't say that you should clean it. And it didn't
Mhm.
say that you have to oil it. It says it's self-oiling. I didn't even know I could take the little stitch plate off of the machine. I didn't know how. The manual didn't tell you to. It just told you to bring it in once a year for service. And I'm like, well, I only sew on it 2 or 3 times a year when I like hem up some pants or something. But
Mhm.
then throughout its lifetime, I've like altered a fur coat. And how much lint gets under that stitch plate. I had no
Yeah.
idea. So when it started, I think the timing was off at some point. I mean, not
Mm.
surprisingly. And I brought it into a place in LA, like a little mom and pop, not dealer, just like a fixer upper shop. And he was like, "It's a nice machine." I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I've never actually had it clean before." And he's like, "Yeah, I could tell." So, and he'd like fix the timing and everything, and it was good. And that was my wake up call to like clean your machine. Even if the manual doesn't tell you, which I think was stupid of them to do.
Right.
Um, yeah, but like clean your machine regularly, you won't have as many problems. All those things. So I go through all of those in like the first video of my class before we even start the class, because I think
Mm.
it's so important, especially with doing hobbies as like something that should be relaxing, to
Mhm.
get into, I call it the flow, artistic flow. I don't know if you've heard about it, when you just forget everything around you and you're just
Mhm.
in the zone. And that's like the best way to work, right?
Yeah.
So if your sewing machine messes up every, I don't know, minute or two, you're never going to get into that flow.
Right.
And it's always going to happen right when you are getting into it, and it's going to stop you, and you're going to be mad, and you're going to not want to continue.
Yeah.
So, knowing your tool and making it work for you and not against you is really important, I think. So, spending time reading your manual, practicing on your machine. When I got my new Bernina, it took me about 2 months to get used to it. And I did
Mhm.
all kinds of different projects I could imagine: bags, quilts, free motion, straight quilting. I put it through the paces on
Yeah.
projects that weren't important, to really learn how to use it, and read the whole manual through before I started, and it's a lot of people just like don't read the manual and just go, and then that's karma. You get back what you put into it, like
Yeah.
it may still need a little bit more, like how to thread it correctly, like
Mhm.
every machine is different, so you
Mhm.
can't just guess that, unfortunately. Every time I use a featherweight, I have to pull up, okay, how did we thread this again?
Yeah.
And then little things like, for the older machines, sometimes you thread left to right or right to left, and that makes a difference. Believe
Mhm.
it or not, you wouldn't think it does. Or like just one little thread in the bobbin case on a featherweight can completely lock it up. You
Mhm.
wouldn't think so. A lot of people sell these old featherweights that don't work, and all
Mhm.
you have to do is take out the bobbin case, remove a little piece of thread, and it runs like new.
You're like, this still works actually.
Yeah, that's what happened with the one I bought one for $50 at my local thrift store.
Wow.
It didn't run, I just removed that little thread and it oiled it and it ran again. So
Mm.
That's why I love those old little machines. If you're in the club and you knew how they work, I'm like in the Facebook group with all the experts and you learn. And
Yeah.
that goes
Yeah.
for your bigger machines too. If there's a piece of link thread in it,
Hmm.
you may look them up and you're like, damn, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
And some,
diva. It hates me. And I'm like, no, it's not the machine. It's you using the
yeah.
machine how it's not intended to be used.
Right. Yeah. It's like most of the time it's human error, just like, yeah, missing those little threads do make such a huge difference in how your machine runs. And if there's just one in the wrong place, it's gonna lock everything up because like everything needs to work precisely and there's, movements that need to happen that if there's something in the way, it's not going to do what it needs to do. And it's it's frustrating, but also like you said, like if you take good care of your machine, if you clean it out and do basic maintenance on it, then you can get into that flow. And have you heard of how do you say his name? I think you say Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He's like a
Mm-mm.
I don't even know. I think he wrote a book, but anyway, he talks about the state of flow of something being like just challenging enough that it's like it's not too hard and it's not too easy because if it's too easy, then it's boring. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
just that proper amount of challenge, um, and you have where your skills meet that challenge and you can accomplish something like that. That flow you get into is like so therapeutic and it can be meditative and there's all these benefits. But anyway, I learned about that in when I was teaching. It was a like a book study group I was in with some other teachers and relating that to my students but also just to myself of like, yeah, of course I'm frustrated, like my tools aren't working or I'm hitting a point where my skills don't match what I need to do. And so I think removing any barriers that are not your own self or the skills that you have, if it's just cleaning your machine or making sure you have proper tools or setting yourself up for success can just get you into that state sooner, quicker, and you can stay in it longer because you don't have to mess with a machine that's got 10 years worth of lint in it or you know built up little threads from just sewing because that happens, right? But anyway, that's important. And I love that you included that in your class because I think it's a step we can kind of skip and wanting to just get to the fun part, the sewing and the creating. But if you don't take care of those steps ahead of time, it's like you're gonna run into problems.
Yeah, and I'm making a point of checking in with students too periodically to say like, hey, how is it going? Are you having trouble? Are you getting into flow or not? If not, go back to that troubleshooting video that you probably skipped when you started, like,
Yeah.
or also tips like removing distractions. If somebody distracts you every 10 minutes, I have my cat as a guest in that video because he does that for me. Um, then it's harder to get into flow. You got to be grounded and relaxed and like ready to work. You don't
Hmm.
have to be in all makeup and like
Hmm.
in the 1950s or 40s singer books. I have one of those where it says, before you sew, make sure that you look pretty and that all your housework is done. And I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's hilarious, but
My
it was
gosh.
serious, which is kind of, you know, but
Oh.
and so sometimes when I used to write screenplays for film stuff,
Hmm.
sometimes I was, sitting in front of the blank page and in the like, writer's block thing, you stare at the blank page and where you write something like, it sucks. And
Hmm.
why doesn't this come out right? And to fight that, I would write in my pajamas. I would like get up, not shower, eat junk food, keep my pajamas on, and then write to give like this like outside world the message, hey, I don't care what you think, I don't care what anybody else thinks, I don't care what critics think, I'm just gonna write what I want and then I'll fix it so it sounds nice later.
Yeah.
um so there's so many things you can do to invite the flow and to turn off that inner critic that sometimes stands in the way. So I have several tips throughout the class to help with that too, because I think the most important part is not really perfecting the technique, because the technique is really easy. It's straight line sewing. Everybody knows how to do that if they sign up for a sewing class. And if they don't, they'll learn it in the troubleshooting video. Um,
Mhm.
but the really important thing is to stick with it and to have fun with it. Because if
Mhm.
you don't have fun with it, you won't finish it.
Yeah.
Let's be real. We're in a world where all the hobbies are right in front of you and you can just do something else or
Yeah.
be on your phone or who knows.
Yeah.
So I really want to get people to enjoy, quilt painting, the technique I'm teaching, because it is really like doodling and painting.
Mhm.
And I want to make it as easy as that. And it's a challenge to get all the students, or to anticipate what all the students may go through, because I'm not live teaching the class, it's
Mhm.
pre-recorded, um, to like still kind of be there and hold their hand while they're going through. So that's what I'm trying to do
Yeah.
with that.
That's so cool. So it's, we've heard of thread painting, but it's painting with fabrics instead. That's kind of that's the concept behind it. And so I did see somebody say, like, comment on one of your posts about it, that it was like, oh, that's thread painting. And you're like, no, it's actually not. Like, in the kindest way possible. Absolutely not. Um, I just thought that was really funny. I'm like, stay in your lane. Don't correct people. It's like you're sharing about your thing. And this person comes in to correct you about your class. I'm like, ugh. Anyway, I just thought that was really funny. So
Yeah.
it's fabric painting, and the concept is just using like thin strips of fabric. You can use scraps or whatever, and just stitching it down, layering, and using different colors and concept, like kind of ideas and shapes to create essentially a painting or an image, but just using the strips of fabric. So yeah, tell me more. How did you get inspired to create the class? Or did you do something first and then think, oh, I could teach this to other people? Like, yeah, how did that come about?
Well, as a pattern designer, I learn a technique, then I make a pattern with it just to like process it and come up and play with it, and then I move on to the next thing. Like, I'm not somebody who could just turn out 10 different house square triangle patterns. I would get really bored with that, because I come from the graphic design background and I want to challenge myself visually, and with techniques too. And so I've been going through different techniques with my patterns, like the pizza, the half square triangles, and I did the pause, which are snowball corners or flip stitch.
Hmm.
And then I challenged myself to do a curved pattern that was the Zen Blossoms, which was a little bit inspired by like Monet, like
Hmm.
the classic Impressionism art. It wasn't impressionistic looking, but it was
Hmm.
water lilies. Um, and but I wanted to go further and find a way to bring art into quilting. That was really
Hmm.
my challenge. So the Zen Blossoms was like the first step into it, being inspired by art. But then I was like, is there a way to use fabric that has great texture, to mimic brush strokes of a painting? And I started with Expressionism because it's very loosely painted, and um, it kind of lends itself to using fabric strips, like, because the smallest you can cut them so they don't fall apart is like a quarter inch. And
Yeah.
it's thick, that's thick brush strokes, right? So I started with that, and did some tests, with different cutting strips different ways, different sizes, sewing them down different ways, different threads. I just tested a lot. And I also encourage students to do that when they start, to find their own, like, what works best for them or what
Hmm.
they like the best. And after a lot of testing, I realized how easy it just is once you get the muscle memory, that it is really like painting, and that I could make a whole painting. And because I love teaching, I've done some language teaching during the pandemic, because I know German, and so I taught in a college over Zoom. I get a really big kick out of seeing other people getting better at something, and progress.
Yeah.
So very early on, I thought this should be a class. I don't only want to make art painting, like two, paintings a year and submit them to shows that wouldn't give me a lot back,
Hmm.
other than external validation, which lasts like 5 minutes. You get the kick and it's over. I
Yeah.
do want to make a more lasting impact and inspire other people. Um, I also after college, I used to work for BuzzFeed's Tasty channel, the cooking videos that you've probably seen in 2015 on Facebook.
Mhm.
And there were those videos went so viral because we have millions of views every day. And
Mhm.
people commented underneath saying, "Oh, let's make this for dinner today," or "Hey, we should meet up this weekend and make this." People posted pictures of how they made the recipe that you come up with in your film,
Mhm.
because we all made our own recipes. And that was so inspiring. And I've been trying to think of a way to like do that again. And so once I figured out this technique, I was like, I don't want to keep this all to myself. I want to share it. And started the gargantuan task on making a class about it, showing every single step. Like, I'm not saying, oh, and then you just keep going and you have a painting. I'm go through every single part of the painting and film everything. So I've been filming for like 6 to 9 months
Oh
just
my
to
gosh.
get that with editing and everything else. Because I love filming and editing and I
Mhm.
love teaching, and it's really enjoying the process. Like, even if nobody were to take the class, I would have had so much fun for 6 months and would have been so fulfilled just by imagining that people will watch it.
Yeah.
But we do already have students, so that part is that part is good. I did a test as well, with some volunteers who did the first 2 weeks, just to see if what I set out to do, um, you know, came through,
Mhm.
and had reflected back to me, how they felt doing the class and what they learned, and if it was too fast or too slow, just so I knew before I filmed everything,
Mhm.
if I was on a good track, since it's the first time.
Yeah.
Not the first time making videos, but the first time pacing it.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool and fun that you just want to share it with people instead of just being like, "Oh, here's the thing I finished." But like, "Let me bring you with me. Let me show you how to do this so you can make your own art." And it's so fun to just try different things because I think, once you've mastered just traditional piecing and in the quilty world, it's kind of like, okay, what's next? Like there's more out there and there's all these different techniques. You can foundation paper your piece, you can English paper piece, you can applique, there's all these different things. And this is just one more dimension where you don't necessarily have to go get a pattern and go buy all this new fabric and do all these things. You can just be inspired by something you see, grab a bunch of scraps and cut them up and work your way through creating a piece of art for yourself or for a gift or it's just really cool. And it's not doesn't seem like it would be too big of a like oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like too not too much of a buy-in. You just have to have some things on hand to get started, but it's not a big commitment to like spending a ton of money or
Yeah.
I think that's where starting new quilts can get daunting is like, do I need to buy a bunch of fabric? Do I have everything I need? But when you're working in small, skinny small strips, you can almost use anything as long as it's in the same kind of color family that you're working with, and you can make multiple different things work. So
Yeah, I used my stash for the first sample. And it came out really nice. And then I used that stash to pick
mm,
colors for my bundle for the class, because we don't need a ton of fabric of each color, but we need a ton of different colors because you can't mix colors with fabric,
yeah.
unfortunately. There is a way I call color mixing, where you get like a little bit of visual color mixing, like you have small pieces of certain colors next to each other, and then you step away and then they kind of blend in. That's
Hmm.
what a lot of impressionists and expressionists did. So we're
Hmm.
going to learn how to do that. But you can't like mix colors like on a watercolor palette.
Yeah.
So the class requires about 20 different fabrics to get the right dimension and contrast with it. I happen to have, those at home. I don't know how many fabrics people have at home, but I think a lot of quilters have a lot of fabric. And you
Yeah.
can even like, maybe you have 10 of the fabrics, and then for the rest of the fabrics, you can go to your local quilt shop and just pick a couple more. You only
Hmm.
need an eighth of a yard per color, and most quilt shops don't cut that small, and that's why I've gone through the trouble to like cut fabric bundles for everybody myself, so that they can have all the colors they need compact. So it's This is the little fabric
Oh,
bundle we have
okay.
with all the different colors, different textures, some solid, some blender-y. Um,
Mhm,
so that's an easy way to start, but I also have lots of instructions on how to find your own colors. I have reference colors with Morabella and Kona. So if you go to your quilt shop and they have those, you can
mhm.
pick fabrics that have the right hue so you can compare them.
Okay.
I'm trying to make it really, really easy. You can use any sewing machine. I've demonstrated on my featherweight in the class
Mhm.
too, because I really want people, like you said, not to have to like buy a ton of stuff. I
Yeah.
think the only thing that's important that most people may not have is a stiletto, a
Mm,
sharp stiletto, because you don't want to like fizzle with your hands close to the needle. That's not safe.
no.
That's the only thing, kind of like a paintbrush,
Mhm.
that's going to be your paintbrush. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought of that before, but it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Um, that's like the most important thing. But otherwise, people have cutting mats, rotary cutters. They have
Mhm,
all that. They have a sewing machine.
mhm.
You can use any thread you want. I have a thread kit that fits with the fabrics I have, so it blends in. That's like the luxury version, but you can really use any matching thread you want, or just gray thread that blends in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you had anybody use like the the clear thread?
Not yet. I mean, the I use variegated thread because it blends in nicely and still gives a little bit of texture.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why people were thinking it's thread painted, because they did see some of the thread shine through, and I think that's fun. Like, I
Hmm.
wouldn't want to just do the quilt with just solids and solid thread that matches, because that would
Yeah.
be very flat. Um, so it helps getting some of the dimension. But then I was also surprised. I quilted mine with glow in the dark thread at the end, like after
Hmm.
it was all sewn. I sewed over it again. And the more you
Yeah.
sew over it, the more texture you get.
Yeah.
Um, and I used glow in the dark thread that's white, or like a creamy color.
Hmm.
And it blended in so nicely because of all the texture that
Yeah.
you wouldn't even be able to tell that it was just plain cream thread.
Yeah.
So you really can use whatever you like.
Okay. That's interesting.
Mm.
I'd be interested to see if, yeah, if somebody does use like the clear thread because it can be kind of shiny and just like if that
Mm-hmm.
would add like another, just like its own dimension because it's clear, gonna reflect the colors
Yeah.
around it. But anyway, that's just thoughts I
And
had.
use
But
glitter thread if you want, but metallic thread can be a pain. So
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh.
unless you have like all kinds of gadgets and gadgets that help with it. I did get a bunch. I use Wonderfill for my thread because they have all the colors I wanted and they're
Hmm.
affordable. And they gave me this like contraption for metallic thread that like rotates your thread evenly. It's like a little
Oh.
like turntable-y thing. I
Uh-huh.
haven't tried it out yet, but I think that's the only way I'm gonna do metallic thread going forward. Because usually it just like rips every foot or so and then have to restart.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I had to do some machine embroidery with gold metallic thread and I was like, I'm gonna lose my mind because it kept breaking and like I was adjusting the tension to try to like make it less, less pull on the thread and it was really hard and I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is crazy. But I think yeah, if you have the right
Yeah.
tools and if you have the right you like know how to work with the tension in your machine, you can make it work. It's just are you willing to do all that?
Yeah. I did make it work actually on my frame. Here, I'll show you the
Oh
quilt real
yeah,
quick.
you need the
So
frame.
this is the quilt.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. If you're not on YouTube, go check it out because this is so cool.
And
Oh, I
you
love
can
it.
see the thread
Yeah.
that's like it blends in. If you step away, you don't see it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Even up close, it's purposeful because it goes along the lines of the pieces of fabric that you've sewn down. And so it doesn't look disruptive at all.
Yeah.
Ah,
So it's really flexible, and hold on, I lost one of my AirPods when I bent over.
oh no.
Um all right. Um it's what I love about it is that there's no rules. You can do you can choose, you could do it with black thread, see what comes out,
Yeah.
and we test that in the beginning to see what kind of look you like.
Hmm.
But oh, I was going to mention I did quilt the frame with metallic thread and makes a little stipple,
Oh
which
yeah.
is just a decorative stitch on your
Hmm.
machine.
Yeah.
on the 9mm. And I looked at what the frame in the Museum of Modern Art looked like
Yeah.
and tried to like replicate, the the
Oh
carvings in
yeah.
the frame with metallic thread. And I made it work somehow with the metallic stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but I chose Expressionism as the first class because I don't think Van Gogh did a lot of sketching before he painted. None of his things are straight. None of
Mm-mm.
the lines are straight there.
Yeah.
Which it can be hard for some quilters who are used to that. So that's
Yeah.
you got to get used to that and like let that go. But
Yeah.
once you do, you really can't go wrong because if
Yeah.
something's not straight or wonky, I mean, the whole thing is wonky anyway, and you can always add another strip and make
Yeah.
it not wonky, or you can always add more or just rip it up, start over. You can't do that
Hmm.
with paint.
Yeah. Yeah. I was gonna say you could kind of fine tune it if it's this, a general shape you want or the general kind of direction you want that piece to go. You can kind of layer on top of it to even it out. And I think that's the cool thing that I've been kind of thinking about as I'm thinking about, your piece that you're sharing and just looking at it and thinking about the process and just kind of noodling on it and like, yeah, you could just really layer things on top of each other. And, I kind of talk about that with some other quilters recently about just like adding to quilts or taking away from quilts and like or just art pieces in general and how yeah there's some mediums where once you paint it you're like oh you have to go through a whole process of scraping it off and it's this whole thing, but with fabric you can just cover it up or you just yeah like seam rip it, take it out and try again. And that's kind of the beauty of it is it's not set in stone just because you put some stitches in it. And um I love that. And I love that you tried to replicate the frame. That's so fun and it just adds to that the art feel of it of like yeah this is a framed piece of art of course like
Well, it also starts a conversation about what is art. And I did a little bit of research, and in the beginning, art was just stuff that people put in gold frames and put up somewhere and declared it so. And I think we can learn from that, and just the pieces we want to be art, we just declare them art. If it's a quilt you make for, a baby quilt for a baby that needs to be loved and used, okay, maybe you don't want to call it art, but something you hang on your wall or you put on your couch to like look pretty and just coordinate it with your room decor or whatever, you can call it art. You put intention into it, you chose the colors, you match them, you made creative decisions.
yeah.
It can totally be art if you want it to be, but if you don't consider it art, nobody else will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lesson I've had from being at QuiltCon for the first time. Because I submitted 4 quilts, 3 of which I designed, and one of which I had made as a test. And I was like, well, it's kind of modern. It was just like a thing I did real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't consider it much, didn't have a place for it anywhere in the house. And I was like, I'll send that in too as like the wild card. And that one got in.
Mm.
And I wouldn't have considered it like a grand piece of art, but once it hung at QuiltCon, it had like a hand quilting on it that looked like rain,
Mm-hmm.
which just like spontaneously came to me while I made it because it's a rainforest flower, the heliconia flower,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what the pattern's called too, heliconia. Um, and because I hand quilted so much with my grandma growing up, it was nothing special to me, the hand quilting. I did a
Yeah.
little bit of matchstick quilting, which I'd never done. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Kind of looks like rain. I'll add a little bit more of a hand. And then I saw people at QuiltCon like going close up to it and be like, whoa, how did you do this? And I'm like, it's just a couple hand stitches. It's not that deep. But
Yeah.
it showed me that art isn't always super complicated. It can be very simple. And
Mm.
it just can be a simple observation you put in that people think, oh, that's clever. I wouldn't have thought of that. It's already art.
Yeah.
And that empowered me to think of my work as art. And that also influenced this art class because I was like, how can we incorporate more art and learn about principles of art and design, which I learned about in college when I went through all that. There's
Mm-hmm.
so many like fun exercises we did in college that I want to incorporate in my classes. And if you don't learn a lot about art principles, you're missing some of the tools you could use. Like your principles of art and design are all tools.
Hmm.
It goes beyond just choosing colors. Because
Yeah.
color, I feel like is like the what people take classes and learn about the most. Because when you make a pattern, most of what you can choose is color, right? But
Yeah.
then there's
Hmm.
also texture, like how are you going to quilt it? What kind of texture do you want?
Hmm.
And with stuff like Van Gogh and quilt painting, there's so much more out there, like how to do a composition, how to use space, like deep space and flat space. Are we
Hmm.
looking out into like, the night sky?
Hmm.
Is it like a, deep feeling, or do we look at a wall? Like there's so many things you can do to convey emotion
Hmm.
in an art piece. And Van Gogh did that very expertly, and we analyze it to death in the class because we want to learn about it.
Hmm.
Um, and there's so many like things to uncover in every painting out there, but
Yeah.
especially in this one. So I want it to be an art class just as much as a fun quilting class. And the
Yeah.
things you learn, you can take with you and apply to everything else you do. So
Yeah.
it's really a life lesson,
Yeah.
hopefully.
No, that's so cool. And I think, yeah, like color, it seems to be the focus when, people are like, I need help. What color should I use for this pattern? I really want to make it, but I don't know what colors to use. And it's like color choice is important because you want it to convey a certain thing, or you don't want it to clash or seem kind of crazy. But like I think there's value in that too, of trying things and sometimes failing and being like, yuck, that turned out ugly. But it's like, now you learned, right? You don't like that color combination or whatever. But I think the principles of art can just, like you were saying, help you further your investigation into how you want to present your quilts and your art. And what is that going to do for the presentation of whether you're making someone else's pattern or you're doing improv or you're fabric painting or whatever you're trying to accomplish with quilting, or fabric fiber arts. Like those concepts are cross discipline that you can carry on to every aspect of your hobbies, whatever it is. So that's really cool. I love that you took
Yeah,
the
and
time. Oh, go ahead.
I love that once you've heard about those principles, you can go to QuiltCon and stop at every quilt and apply them and be like, whoa, I love how they use space in this quilt, which I would have never thought possible like this.
Hmm.
Or I love how they used, this type of color contrast that I've never even thought of. And it kind of just trains your brain to think in different ways, and
Hmm.
just to have more tools for everything you do, and to recognize it's like uh what is the expression? You see one, you know one, or something.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
because there's a theory that if you look at an art piece, you can only really see what you've seen before. You
Hmm.
only recognize things you already know. So the more art you look at, the deeper you go, and the more you can actually see.
Hmm.
And the more you learn about the principles, the more you can see how they're applied. So
Yeah.
it's really a huge learning process. And if you've ever gone through a museum with the audio guide, you've done it because they analyze it for you.
Hmm.
And like you said earlier, when somebody said, "Oh, this is a thread painting," it's because they looked at it and they only recognized what they'd already seen. They
Right.
didn't know that fabric painting, or quilt painting, as I call it, exists. So they
Hmm.
couldn't have noticed it. And that's like a prime example of you can only really see what you already know.
Right.
And so getting to know different things helps you see more.
Yeah. That exposure and that, opening up of your own perspective and, widening your awareness of what's out there is it's just good for yourself. Like it's a good thing overall to do, but also, yeah, it can totally inform how you see the world, and it lets new things in and gives you new perspective on things that you've already seen before, because now you know more and now you can see it with that knowing and that new knowledge. And I think that's really cool, and just opening up people's perspective of, yeah, again, like different and new things you can do, still working with fabric and thread, but just approaching it in a different way to create something new and something unique. And I just love that so much. And it's exciting. It's exciting. And I can't wait to see what people make because that's going to be really cool. And so in the class, are you guiding everybody through making that Starry Night piece?
Yes.
Okay.
It's going to be 10 weeks. It's like a quilt along. They'll have access after the quilt along. So if you don't want to quilt along, you can do it on your own time, however long you want. It's lifetime access as long as the platform Thinkific exists. Even if I don't offer the classes anymore, it'll still be accessible.
Okay.
So you have like access forever. And then in those 10 weeks, every week we work on a part of it. So we work on it in sections and little blocks. It's 12 blocks. And I group them to learn like different techniques and parts of it.
Okay.
So yeah, I just guide you through, and if you follow along, I have a little bit of like catch-up weeks in there if you need, if you need a little bit more time. But if you follow along with me, it's about, I would say, 5 hours a week of time spent. Then you have it done in 10 weeks.
Nice. Okay.
Which is quicker than what it took me to do the first time while I was figuring it out.
Right. I'm like, you were doing all the learning, the hard part that does take longer. So
Yeah.
the fact that you can condense it to 10 weeks, I mean, essentially 50 hours, right? If it's like 5 hours a week for 10 weeks, like in a little overtime work week, you can have, if you condense it down, you can have this really cool piece of art and then apply those principles to making new pieces and different styles. And that's really cool. Well, awesome. So we're actually, you let me sign up to be an affiliate for the class. So anybody who signs up with my code, you get a discount on the class. And like, that's really cool. So hopefully people want to go join while they still can, because it starts in January, this first go
Yeah,
around.
enrollment goes till December 30th because I do want enough time to send out the kits when they're ordered. They're
Okay.
on pre-order. So sign up by the 30th of December if you can.
Okay.
And if you miss it, I'll have a wait list, and then we'll see if I can add a couple more, or if we do the next opening. So
Okay.
I always run them, 10 weeks, have a little break, and then run another one later in the year.
Okay. So you'll have one in kind of like late spring,
Yeah,
you
probably.
think? Okay. So if people miss December, the December sign up for the January class, you can sign up later in the year. But if you use code Grannies when you're buying the class, you get a discount. And it sounds like so much fun. And I'm just, like I said, I'm so excited to see what comes out of it and to see what people do with it. Cause I think it's just, again, opening a whole new perspective of like, look at this avenue in quilting you can take. Like you have these skills, now try something new. And hopefully, people find that flow and get something out of it more than just the end result. The process itself is where all the learning is and where all the growth is. So
And all the fun.
yeah.
Honestly, I go back to like do a quilt, or in the process of filming the class, I went back and did a regular quilt, and I was like, oh, I have to go to the ironing board and iron it, and I have to get and then I find that it's not straight, and I have to undo it and do it again. And I was like, can I please go back to my quilt painting? It was so much fun. And even though I'm making the second one now, so I want the second to film it and show it for the class in detail, because I had to try it out first before I could show people how to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm not bored with it at all. It's like you said, it's challenge enough, even the second time. And then this time I picked the colors really, like I used Photoshop, picked the colors from the painting, got fabrics that match that. And I'm trying to get even closer to like make it more like the painting, if that's even possible. But it's just challenge enough to get you in that flow. And I'm just like being in that flow. So as much as you have a quilt at the end, I think the process is really the most fun part. Just doing it, having something to do where you can just immerse yourself and like get a little bit challenged,
Yeah.
So hopefully people enjoy doing it and they're not just about the result, because that would be very painful for 10 weeks. It
Yeah.
takes a while.
Yeah.
Or maybe they can learn to let it go and just embrace the process, you know.
Hmm.
That
For
could be
sure. Like,
something new to learn.
yeah, you don't always have to like the end result to get something out of the process either. So it's
Yeah.
just there's so much there. So um well, before we wrap this up, I just want to ask you if you have like a tip or just a piece of advice that carries you through any kind of quilting or tough spots and what that would be like in a nutshell. Because I know we've talked about lots of different things, but
Mhm. I think grounding yourself is really important. If something's not working, to just take a minute, step away, sit down, calm down, ground
mhm,
yourself, and then try to troubleshoot or sleep over it. Come back the next morning and then troubleshoot. Because once things luck up, don't work, get not straight, um, you're not in the right headspace to deal with them because it's a sign of like stress or something not being aligned. So I feel like pausing and taking the time to pause and fix things or to ground yourself before you fix things is a good way to go. I don't always do it and then I regret it later.
yeah, right.
um like I was just working on a project where I tested out my seam allowance. I got a new machine. I tested it out. It was totally off. And I ignored it because I was like, oh, maybe I just cut the pieces too small. And then I sewed like super long strips with it. And I was like, something's really off because the blocks came out half an inch short. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So I realized that on the new machine, the foot wasn't aligned right, and that was the problem.
Oh,
So I shouldn't have ignored my test because I even went and did the test, and then I ignored it because I
yeah.
wanted to get on with it. Um, so like, yeah, I don't always do it, but a good tip is to just sit down and be like, okay, something didn't go right. So what could it be? Let's take the time to figure it out before we start or
Yeah.
before we fix a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost end up wasting more time fighting against it than you would if you just took the few minutes to figure out the problem in the first place. Like when the problem first arises, then if you just try to work through it, it's like you spend so much more time undoing mistakes or like trying to fix the problem it keeps creating. And so that's valuable advice because I think it is important. And when you get dysregulated, going back and giving yourself some space to find regulation again so that you can approach the problem is it's important because otherwise, yeah, you end up doing things really gruffly or you might end up breaking something or ruining, a lot of fabric in the process where if you would just taken the time, you can avoid that. And it's easy to know but hard to remember. So
Yeah, the flow killer. Stress
yeah,
is the flow killer.
the flow killer. Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Eva. I've really enjoyed getting to know more about you and talking about your class, and hopefully people go sign up for it. And I'm just, like I said, excited to see what people come up with and just watch the growth from it. So thanks again. And
Yeah,
yeah, we'll
thanks for
see.
letting me talk about it. I love talking about it.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course. And we'll put all the links in the show notes below, but you're on Instagram at Gingerly Quilt Co.
Uh-huh.
And where else can people find you?
Well, I have a Facebook page. I don't post a lot there. My Instagram posts go automatically there, but if you're on Facebook, not Instagram, it's Gingerly Quilt Co as well. And then on TikTok, I'm Gingerly Quilt Co, but we don't know how long TikTok's gonna be around. So
Right? It's like, don't bank
maybe
on
just,
that.
yeah, if you're on Instagram, that's where I spend most of my time. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And they can get to your signups there from the link in your bio there.
Yeah, or just
Okay.
go on my website, gingerlyquiltco.com, has
Okay.
a newsletter and class sign up
Okay.
both in there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll put all the links below in the show notes so that people can get to it in one click. And then otherwise, go sign up for the class and we will keep our eye on what you've got coming up next.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thank you.